The whole thing with All Too Well was that this was a very emotional rant that I did in like a sound check. We were rehearsing for the Speak Now tour. I was very sad in a way that, you know, you're like 21 years old and you're just like excruciatingly, just like you are. Sadness is you, you are sadness. In a break, I just started playing the same 4 chords over and over again. It's basically the same 4 chords over and over again for the whole song. And it just became this thing where I just started rambling, and this thing went on for a really, really long time. It was like more than 10 minutes that this rambling rant went on, and it wasn't cohesive and it wasn't really that structured, but it felt afterward like, I think my mom or somebody went up to the sound guy and was like, "Did you by any chance record any of that?" And he was like, "Yeah, I did." And I would have walked away from it if he didn't have a recording of it. So I went back and listened to it, and I was like, oh, here's this 10-minute, like, basically catharsis of intense emotion. Like, there are some really angry, scathing parts that I was like, kind of gonna have to make this into a song that's a little bit more palatable, because I already felt so, like, raw putting that song out as detailed as it was. So then it goes out into the world. It didn't make a lot of noise, that song, for the first 6 months to a year, but then the fans just did a thing that they've done a few times where this song just keeps bubbling up. They did this with Cruel Summer too, where they're just like, no, we like it. We don't care if a label wants to put it out. We love this one. So I ended up playing it on the Grammys. Mistake of kind of explaining how the song came to be in an interview. It ended up being a really fortuitous mistake that turned into being like, oh, I'm so glad that happened. But for years, the fans were like, give us the 10-minute version, give us the 10-minute version. And I was like going back through diaries and finding like little fragments of it. And I didn't have the like old thing anymore. So I was looking through safes, trying to find the CD, but I had to go back and piece together lyrics and stuff. But that was the most extensive restoration process I've ever done on a song. I don't think I'll ever experience anything like that again.
Taylor Swift recently
I've had a guy be like,
while she understands
you're not going to write about this, are you?
Emotional connection fans have with her lyrics,
yeah, I am.
The level of investigation some listeners bring to her music can sometimes feel overwhelming, especially as online discussions continue to dissect every line she writes. And this conversation resurfaced after she was recognized by the New York Times as one of the 30 Greatest Living American Songwriters. A moment that highlighted not only her influence, but also the intense scrutiny surrounding her creative process. And in reflecting on that attention, she explained that she is fully aware of how certain corners of her fan base approach her songs, almost like puzzles waiting to be solved, with listeners analyzing timelines, relationships, and emotional cues in an effort to assign each lyric to a specific person from her past, something she described with a mix of humor and honesty, noting that people often go as far as building elaborate theories, connecting dots in ways that resemble detective boards filled with assumptions, speculation, and carefully constructed narratives. Yet despite appreciating the passion behind it, she admitted that it can cross into uncomfortable territory when the focus shifts away from the artistry itself and turns into a kind of investigation into her personal life, particularly when fans insist on identifying exactly which former partner inspired a track, turning her work into what she jokingly compared to a paternity test, a comparison that underscored her frustration with the idea that songs must belong to someone else rather than being recognized as her own creations. And she emphasized that regardless of inspiration, she is the one who writes the music, shaping the emotions, experiences, and stories into something uniquely hers. A reminder that her songs are not simply reflections of past relationships, but carefully crafted pieces of art. And as her career has evolved, the fascination with her dating history has only intensified, with names like Harry Styles, John Mayer, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Joe Jonas frequently appearing in fan theories, social media breakdowns, and viral discussions, all attempting to map her discography onto her personal timeline, creating a culture where each new release sparks a wave of speculation before the music is even fully absorbed. And she reflected on how this pattern has become almost predictable, with audiences immediately searching for clues instead of simply experiencing the songs. Yet she made it clear that her relationship with songwriting has always been deeply personal, rooted in her own perspective and emotional truth, rather than a desire to document specific individuals. And she described the process as something she must protect, holding tightly to her interpretation of her work before releasing it into the world, knowing that once it is out there, it no longer belongs solely to her, and at that point, the audience takes over, bringing their own meanings, assumptions, and interpretations, which can sometimes diverge significantly from her original intent. But she accepts that as part of being an artist, acknowledging that once a song is released, it becomes a shared experience, open to interpretation and discussion. Even if that discussion occasionally veers into territory she finds strange or overly invasive. And despite everything, she maintains a sense of perspective, expressing that whether people immediately connect with her music or only come to appreciate it years later, the most important thing is that she created it for herself first, a sentiment that reinforces her commitment to authenticity in her work. And if you enjoy hearing stories like this, tap subscribe quickly, because the way she balances personal expression with global attention continues to shape how modern artists navigate fame. And as the conversation around her songwriting continues to evolve, it also reflects broader changes in how audiences engage with music in the digital age, where platforms amplify every theory and discussion, turning individual interpretations into collective narratives that can spread rapidly across communities, often blurring the line between appreciation and intrusion. And she acknowledged that while she cannot control how people respond to her work, she hopes listeners remember that the songs are ultimately hers, shaped by her voice and perspective, rather than definitive accounts of specific relationships. And this distinction is important to her because it preserves the integrity of her art, allowing it to exist beyond the confines of her personal life. And as she continues to release new music, the cycle of speculation is unlikely to slow down, but her stance remains consistent, encouraging fans to engage with the music while respecting the boundary between interpretation and assumption. And she also hinted at the idea that the meaning of a song can evolve over time, not just for listeners, but for her as well, as she grows and changes, revisiting her own work from new perspectives, which adds another layer of complexity to the idea of assigning fixed meanings to her lyrics. And in many ways, this ongoing dialogue between artist and audience is part of what keeps her music relevant, sparking conversations that extend far beyond the songs themselves, yet she remains grounded in her approach, focusing on the act of creation rather than the noise that follows. And before we get deeper into how this shapes her future projects, hit subscribe, because her perspective offers a rare glimpse into the realities of being one of the most analyzed songwriters in the world. And ultimately, her message is simple but powerful. She writes for herself, she releases her work, and what happens next is out of her hands, a process that requires both confidence and acceptance, especially in an era where every detail can be dissected and debated. And while she appreciates the passion of her fans, she hopes they can embrace the music without feeling the need to solve it like a mystery, allowing the songs to resonate on their own terms rather than being tied to specific narratives. And as she continues to navigate this balance, her voice remains clear, reminding everyone that behind every lyric is an artist who crafted it with intention, emotion, and creativity, not a puzzle waiting to be solved. And if there is one takeaway she wants listeners to hold on to, it is that her music belongs to her first, even as it becomes part of a larger cultural conversation. And that understanding adds a new dimension to how her work can be appreciated, shifting the focus from speculation to connection, which is where she believes the true power of songwriting